And we have several recommendations. The first one is Code Enforcement Board. There's a recommendation from Code Enforcement Manager Sunny Marshall to appoint Brady Reed as a regular member to a 3-year term beginning May 1st, 2023 and ending April 30th, 2026. And Mayor, would you like to do these all together?
Yes, ma'am.
There's 3 of them under this board? Okay. And then also to appoint Jose Alicia as a regular member to a 3-year term beginning June 1st, 2023 and ending May 31st, 2026. And also to appoint Curtis Lewis as an alternate member to a 3-year term beginning April 17th, 2023 and ending April 16th, 2026. I would entertain a motion to approve those code enforcement recommendations.
So moved.
A second.
Okay.
Any discussion? Okay, and all in favor of the code enforcement recommendations?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, hello, Commissioner
Would you prefer
McGraw.
to second that motion?
Second. And aye.
Okay, and on our Historic Preservation Board, we have a recommendation from Senior Planner Emily Foster to appoint Brittany Wilson to fulfill an unexpired term of Jeremy Moses beginning April 17th, 2023 and ending March 6th, 2025. Ms. Wilson will be eligible to serve an additional full 3-year term. Entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, and any discussion? All in favor of the Historic Preservation Board?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. And on the Lakeland Housing Authority, there's a recommendation from Mayor Bill Mutz to appoint Charles Welsh as an at-large member to fulfill the unexpired term of Judy Moss beginning April 17th, 2023 and ending April 30th, 2025. Mr. Welch will be eligible to serve an additional full 4-year term.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. On the Mayor's Council for the Arts, there's a recommendation from Mayor Bill Mutz to reappoint Darrell Ward as an at-large member to an additional 3-year term beginning April 6, 2023 and ending April 5th, 2026. And also to appoint Georgia Dean as an at-large member to a 3-year term beginning April 17th, 2023 and ending April 16th, 2026. Ms. Dean will be eligible to serve an additional full 3-year term.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, and is there any discussion on that?
Art background and passion to be able to participate. You may even have that in here.
Oh, cool. I was trying to pull it up online. It's okay. I can look there.
I can try to get it to you if I don't have it here, which I think I do.
Just a second. Yeah, I've already motioned to approve.
Artist in the greater Tampa Bay area. She's a designer and illustrator with 6+ years of experience creating and directing compelling visuals and brand narratives for 15 organizations, from local businesses to large corporations. Team-oriented and self-motivated with experience in project and team management, as well as creative and art direction. So she has, this is her passion.
Both sides.
Yes,
Yeah.
both sides.
Thank you. And it's in your meeting report. Yeah. I was just, my thing is powering up.
Mine would take way too long to get that for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and we had discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And then on the Nuisance Abatement Board, we have a recommendation from Mayor Bill Mutz to reappoint Daniel Price to an additional 3-year term beginning June 16th, 2023, and ending June 15th, 2026. We have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, and any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And again, we still have some vacancies, and really surprisingly, I just think that the Community Redevelopment Area Advisory Board, there's 3 members for folks who have property or a business or work in the Dixieland CRA, one in the Midtown CRA, and one in the Downtown CRA. Again, just anyone you know, it's a really great board to participate on and see how we're revitalizing our community redevelopment areas. Also, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is looking for 3 members, one who's an employer within the jurisdiction, one who's engaged in the residential home industry, and one who resides in the city limits. So those 2, and then also the Zoning Board of Adjustments and Appeals is looking for an alternate member. And other than that, do we have any other discussion for the municipal board and committee?
I was just going to make the comment that Heather has done a marvelous job in bringing all these things to bear and getting them to us, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the organizational work that she does. And it's wonderful to see the volunteerism that people have expressed, and I'm so appreciative of each of these people who are willing to serve, because in many regards, this is thankless and unknown, and these are very much part of what makes our city such a livable city. So in every one of those nominations, I'm very, very personally grateful.
Yes, and we will be having our volunteer appreciation dinner coming up. Is it a week from today?
On the 21st at Cleveland Heights, in the main ballroom.
Yeah, so that's always fun every year to get
Yes,
together
it sure
with
is.
the people who volunteer for these boards. Were you going to say something?
I was. Speaking of the CRA vacancies, Valerie did share with the advisory board last week that she has a number of applications, names that are interested. So I think we'll be hearing more on that soon. But thank you for continuing. There's still time if somebody's out there and fits that, meets the criteria. So stay tuned. I think we'll hear more. So,
Yeah, she's been doing interviews on that, so
Okay,
that's
good.
great.
Oh, good. Okay,
I've asked a few people too and encouraged them. I'm like, do you want to do this? You should look online, and especially the Dixieland one.
okay,
Well, all of
yes.
I just wanted to thank Sunny and her team. I know that, speaking of thankless, and sometimes some of the stuff that she goes against, but every time that I've had somebody reach out to me, I've sent it over to her team, and it's been handled flawlessly. So don't get to see you often, so thank you.
Yeah.
On my end, it's flawless.
It doesn't mean that everybody always
Absolutely.
agrees, but there's standards that are set. Count it all.
To say.
Well, I think that was probably the most exciting municipal board and committee that we've had in a while. So, any other discussion on this topic? All right, meeting adjourned.
And we will wait until 8:30 to begin.
Not done.
we have some really fun proclamations coming, but before we get to those, we will have our Community and Economic Development Report that we do annually, and we have that brochure that each of you have gotten a copy of that'll be available for that. And we're so grateful, by the way, for the continued success of the CRA and the leadership that is shown. And Valerie, I know you're in there somewhere. I just lost you.
She's over here.
Okay. And thank you so much for that. Then we're going to have an opportunity for a presentation on being the Grapefruit League's Best Ballpark 2023 Award, and that will be fun to watch. And then a check presentation to Common Ground Park from the Lakeland Rotary Clubs. When we get to proclamations, we will have breast cancer, donate life, drive electric, Earth Day, medical lab, National Arbor Day, and Shared Parenting Day. And then we're going to have Deaf History Month. We have designated for the deaf visitors who will be coming, and includes students, that would be around 9:30. So they may come a little late and assemble. We think that'll be enough time for them to be there. But if perchance they're not in the room, we will stop there, go forward into our meeting, and then go back until they are seated and assembled. We will also have interpreters there, and one of the students is going to do an oration back to us by sign that someone will then interpret, and it's a wonderful speech, and I've gotten a chance to be able to read it first, and so that's a special time. It's the first time we've ever done this at commission meeting.
Yay.
And so, and I'm sure it probably will be a repeated month, and April is Deaf History Month.
Mayor, how did that come about? This is the first time requested.
But it's just nice to see something like that getting set up and handled, you know? And Jenny Sykes supported all that background effort in that as well. Then we go to municipal boards and committees report, which Stephanie will do, and so that takes us then to the consent items, the minutes, and then item 6C1 under city attorney.
All right, 6C1 is just a request for you to approve the short list and a continuing contract for some software engineering services. Water Utilities needs those services to develop software for its programmable controllers and distributed control systems, both at its treatment plants as well as in the collection and distribution systems that they operate. They issued a RFQ, request for qualifications, pursuant to the Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act back in November. We had two firms respond to that, General Control Systems out of Lakeland, and Revere Control Systems also out of Lakeland, and they are recommending that we retain both of those, get those both on a continuing contract. And this will actually not authorize them to do any work. As you know, under our continuing contracts, when we have a project for them to work on, we'll issue a task authorization with a not to exceed amount, and that will happen in the future. But so this is a no dollar deal. Just ask for you to approve the short list and putting those two firms under a continuing contract.
Any objection to leaving that on consent?
Just one question.
Yes, Commissioner Simmons.
How would you use both of them with regard to any tasks?
Yeah. Sure. Usually the department that retains a firm under continuing contract will assess that firm's expertise in particular and see which firm is better suited for the project that they need. They look at other things as well, like their availability, whether they're already fully booked working on other projects, and obviously dollar amounts come into play as well.
So at any given task, both of them would be considered?
Sure. Sure.
And only those two?
Yes.
So that shortens the need for another RFP, so that they can continue because they performed work prior.
Thanks.
Okay, was there, I didn't look, that is the only answer, yes, okay. So we'll leave that on. Public hearings.
So we have 4 ordinances for second reading, all zoning-related ordinances that we can go through if you want, or if you've heard enough, we don't need to go through them this morning. It's at your discretion. Chuck's in the seat ready to show you maps and everything if you'd like.
So are there any items here that people would love to have the explanation on prior to the meeting? Seeing none. we will-
Wait, you're kind of going fast. Even all these four second readings?
I will pause longer.
I'm trying to get logged in yet.
Where's the one where they're going to take down the historic building? That's the one I want to talk about.
Yeah, that one is item 4.
Yeah, that's four.
Okay. I love that one. Anyone else need any other
Yeah,
ones?
I'd like that one too.
Okay.
Drop down to that.
Don't rush me past that one.
Bless you.
So this one is a standard zoning change, so it's not a planned unit development, so there's no binding site plan attached to it. But it's changed zoning from C1 to multifamily in Route 22.
Bless you.
The property is in the northwest corner of downtown on the north side of Lake Wire. South side Peachtree, north side is Magnolia and the in-town bypass, and then the site is just east of Martin Luther King Avenue. So this is the house in question. This is the house that's currently on the site that was formerly Zora's. And at this point, my understanding is that the owner of the property is looking, has at least let it known that the house is available to be moved, but I don't know if there's anybody that's taken them up on the offer yet. But it's not a protected home. There is some significance, I believe, in terms of the architect who designed the house, but there's nothing that's been formally protected. It's not a historic district or an individually protected structure itself.
Yes, Commissioner McCarthy.
So, since it's not in a designated historic district, it's not protected, correct? And then would the previous owners have had to apply for it to be on the National or State Register for it to be protected? How would this have been protected or in preservation, considered preserved?
So there's two designations typically with historic structures, one being National Register, which tends to be more honorific, with the exception of if there are federal funds used for those projects, and there's additional review steps that are taken. Local designation is really where you get into the protection of historic resources because it's done by ordinance, by the local government, and then it sets up the process for design review through the Historic Preservation Board. So in the case of National Register, the owners could have sought that designation, and then locally as well, the owners could have done it, or the Historic Preservation Board could make a recommendation, and that could come to the City Commission to formally designate the property. Owner authorization is not needed for that, but to my knowledge, I don't know that there's ever been any designation within Lakeland where that's taken place without owner authorization.
So what's the trigger? So, we have a lot of historic properties like throughout the community, especially in communities that have sort of been bifurcated by, George Jenkins Boulevard and Kathleen Road and all that. What would be the trigger prior to, would it be on the owner's responsibility to come to us and say, hey, we want to put this in a protected, or do we look, because I just know of the historic preservation that happens like in our neighborhood in Beacon Hill, there's an overarching system in place because it's I get that it's in a designated area, but when you look at other areas that are historically significant but maybe don't have a neighborhood association or maybe don't have any kind of like community groundswell of support to protect those things, and I'm thinking specifically like about Northwest, like if there's anything in and around Lincoln Avenue Academy or any of those, what would keep people from just tearing down and then moving forward and not really taking a pause to look at the significance, relevance, and importance of a property?
The local designation would be that trigger, and we have had some other neighborhoods within the city come to us with interest in becoming designated, and that has been considered by the Historic Preservation Board. The area around Lake Hollingsworth, for example, there have been requests in the past for that, and the Preservation Board has looked at that, did not feel that there was enough support for that or enough of a concentration of structures to move forward. But, the city was aware of a structure that they felt was important. It could be something that the city could initiate and bring it before the Historic Preservation Board.
I just think
HLI too. So they have a list of structures, I think, that they have on their radar that they look at. And I think if they ever got word of something that they felt was important, I could see them coming forward with a recommendation to the Historic Preservation Board to start the process. But again, that's not occurred.
Yeah, it's just so close to the Buffalo Soldier Encampment site with that historic marker that I can't see that it wouldn't have been relevant I don't know when that was probably, the Buffalo Soldiers, they were probably there before that house was built, because I don't know the year of that house, but it's still pretty old. The house is.
Commissioner Sumner.
My question is, what would be criteria for designating a structure as historic?
So the baseline is usually 50 years old or older, so the age, and then beyond that, they look at, is it architecturally significant, like is it a style that people recognize, and is it a good example of that style? Historical significance, so did someone famous or contributing to the history of the city live there or work there? Cultural significance, so if there was an association with an event. So all those things can be criteria for designation.
Thank you.
So, and it sounds like it has a lot of those. I mean, it's the Bryant House, right?
Yep.
So, and I'm just curious because it seems like, have we made sure that we've checked even like at the state level? 'Cause sometimes I find like it won't be on the locally, but then it's on the state. It was on a map at one time. So have we searched and made, a conclusive report
I'll have
that
to double check with Emily on that. I don't believe there was ever what they call a Florida master site file that was created for this structure. So that's kind of like the inventory of structures that the state keeps. I don't believe there was, and I think it most likely was because of the age of the structure. Right now we're coming into 50 years going back to the 1970s.
Yes,
Show my age.
There's several historic structures in this room.
Yeah. So, I think, as time progresses, we get more structures that come of age, and probably at the time, this wasn't seen as significant, but, now obviously it's within the time frame. And
is there anything else from that era in a particular radius?
yeah, not that I can.
So I would not vote for this until I know more information about that building.
Commissioner Music.
I would like to agree, but dissent against that, because where I get a little frustrated is that a building will sit forever. And then until somebody wants to tear it down, then we all want to get behind it. And I mean, I would have thought the Buffalo Soldiers would have been a trigger, right? But this is 1925, so it's obviously that the time frame doesn't play into it. But I mean, to me, it's one of the most beautiful buildings around. I mean, I love that building. I was in it prior to Zora's when it was it was a dental school at some point back in the 50s or something. But I want to balance not standing in the way of somebody that owns a piece of property that wants to tear something down that hasn't been registered, and then all of a sudden we can come along and raise our hand and say, no, time out. I want to get that thing, designated. So now all of the plans and investment that they've put into that has to stop for a building that nobody's gone in the last X number of years.
But if
And that's
there were
where I
no other
struggle.
properties that they could build multifamily, it would be one thing. There's other properties that they could build as well, but we don't get historic back. There's no way to get this back. You cannot go back and reproduce a building from that era.
Well, that is true, and I think that if we only had that building as a representative in our town, that would make sense. We have a lot of 1920 structures here, a lot of them, and a lot of them that are contributing and that are surrounded by other.
Mike, is there a lot? Are there a lot on that lake?
Right. So no, and I don't think there is. And I don't think that there is.
Preserved old homes, or should, our whole thing is the west-east divide, hoping that we're not like mowing down houses like we did to make an RP funding center. Like we want to preserve history. If it's there, let's not do any more erasing of the
So I would agree with that statement 100%. We want to preserve history, but what I don't want to do is get in the way of preserving a building just because it's a building that's old. That would be my position. History, I agree with you 100%. Right? And if there's something that gets tied to that somebody can say, here's why we want to save that, I agree with that 100%.
Well, I'll be voting no, so.
Okay.
I hope it doesn't pass.
I know that building was looked at commercially for lots of other uses that never converted. I mean, that the buyer, they never bought to do that. And when you think of the Likewire area, which I'm asking him to pull up, we have so much opportunity in terms of development for housing in this area. And north of it, as well as to the west of it. And it is a blighted area that we want to make sure that we are doing that and doing that development and building it. And so when we think about if you're going to do multifamily and you have the opportunity to do that, it would be nice if that multifamily also had some access to lake views as well. So the ideal thing would be if somebody would move the house, because then I think all parties would be appeased. But it wouldn't tie into the Buffalo Soldiers, per se.
Well, and I, vacillate too. I understand, I totally agree with you. I also agree that we can't get back. One of my other concerns with this site is that school that's right there is LCMA. That is a magnet school. So the children at middle school age who live in a multifamily housing right there will not have the ability to walk to that school. So the traffic and the impacts on Lakewire, the road, as well as trying to traverse and get back out to the west and go north, is going to be precarious because you have that road that runs parallel to George Jenkins Boulevard that is the little through street that's used for car line. I know y'all get sick of me saying car line, but it's a reality until everyone gets on a bus or
How many hours
walks.
have you sat in the car?
If I aggregate my
3
hours, I have had a lifetime in Carline. But I think we have to be cognizant of all of these factors. Like, it's not a 100% thing. Like, it's where are we putting it? How is it accessible? Yes, it looks in theoretical form like, oh, that's a great spot for it. And it is, and I want to have more density. And I agree with the mayor, too. I just think we have to think about all these different pieces. And also, it's our job as the commission to represent the constituents. So I get frustrated when I hear, well, it's already a done deal and it's second reading and this is what X says that we have to do. Well, no, we're representative of the community. And so we have to be the last gate, before something happens because we can't return it. It's just like mowing down orange trees. We're not getting orange trees back. Or mowing down, putting in a cow pasture 150 homes. No one's ever going to bulldoze a new development in 50 years and put it back to a cow pasture. So we have to be very cognizant of all these pieces collectively, and that's why I'm, the trigger for me was the historic home, because Commissioner Madden said it before I got a chance to at the last meeting, but I think we were on the same wavelength. That helped me pause, but I still am paused about how people are going to traverse in a multifamily space when they can't. Well, if we want to promote walkability and connectivity from all sides of downtown, even connectability over to Bonnet Springs, so a multifamily unit can have access to green space. I love that it's on the lake, but also how do they traverse over to Bonnet Springs? That connectivity is not in play yet. We don't know when it will be. I don't want to continue to make spaces that are limited and confining to the people who are renting there, or if they're condos buying there, whatever they're doing. And we have to be cognizant of that because we're the ones that hear about it later on. So when somebody moves in and doesn't know about this discussion and is there and then they can't pull out because there's a car line and they can't get to the brand new $120 million park because there's no walkway, they call us. And then we've already tied our own hands with regard to that, and we're not thinking of the whole community and the whole people that are going to live there.
So, not coming in. So, the only comeback I would say to that is we aren't the only people that have reviewed this. We have staff that does a fabulous job of vetting us in the first place, planning and zoning that goes through that process, and I want to be very supportive of those recommendations, too. We are appropriately the backstop for something that shouldn't happen from our constituency standpoint. But when we see the boatload of work that is done to, first of all, get a buyer for a property, and then secondly, for something that there can be a use for, instead of it sitting there idly for, 5 years, 6 years?
Longer than that.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of properties that have sat a lot longer. We're just now building, so, that's not a good excuse.
Understand.
There's a lot of other properties that have sat.
But there's a wide review of this done. It isn't just that it has come up the last minute, and I'm just encouraged.
It just feels that way sometimes to me as a commissioner, that there is a lot of back-end work that goes into it, and then we're brought in for the first reading. It's not like I saw it before the first reading.
Well, and we're
that was 2 weeks ago.
the public opinion and compatibility as electeds. We have a different job than the staff. Absolutely, our staff does a magnificent job
Yes.
of crossing their T's and dotting their I's. So this is no complaint against our staff. They are the best in the business. it's us as elected saying, okay, now, if I polled all my young, friends and people who are like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. We have multifamily next to that historic building, next to that cool mid-century across this lake, and next to a brand-new high-rise that's coming over on the Lake Ware property. We're the ones who look from the bird's eye view of the whole thing coming together, and how much better it is when it comes to us and we're able to say this out loud on TV so people can go, oh my gosh, if there's actually development there, now I'll buy that Zora building, or now I'll preserve that because there's going to be more activity there, or now there's more of leverage to use about the car line with the school, so it won't be as impossible for me to get there as it has been in the last decade to have a business that can't get there because of the car line. So it's our job for these conversations to let everybody sort of see what's happening from the bird's eye view, because developers want predictability, right? And if they don't know we don't want warehouses in the Innovation District, or they don't know that we want to keep our historic buildings in Lakeland, Florida, then shame on us. So that's kind of what I feel like these public hearings are for us to be able to let everybody go, okay, City of Lakeland, do we care that there won't be a 1920s with that kind of architecture building anymore around Lake Wire or in that radius ever again? Are we fine with that?
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Chuck, in a second, I was going to ask you just if there's any update or anything you haven't shared so far that you feel like maybe we're missing or we need to know. I would also encourage us, I hear you, Commissioner Madden, but not to get too far into I'm going to vote this way or that way until we get to the public hearing, because I feel like that's why we have the public hearing. Even you may feel strongly a certain way, but I think we owe it to the applicant, to the staff, to hear that presentation and make that decision. I think sometimes in these meetings we get a little too far into what should happen at the public hearing.
We also have to let our colleagues know, because it's the only time we get to chat together.
It is true, but we can also chat at those meetings. And
We don't have to draw a conclusion in this one, I think he's saying.
And something I would just add is this is a more zoomed out version of an area around Lake Wire. But essentially, what we're looking at here is straight zoning, and so there would not be a binding site plan. So if the zoning were approved, I think there still would be an opportunity to, contact the developer and just find out, exactly what efforts are being made to preserve the house, move the house, how are those discussions going? Because ultimately, somebody would need to, want to be able to spend the money that's going to take to, to relocate it, find a piece of property, put it on. But maybe there's some information that the applicant can provide to help us with that.
But just to be clear, there's no requirement.
There's no requirement.
That occur.
One other thing to consider is that, the choice here is not between MF 22 and nothing. It's currently zoned C1. So what would be allowed in C1?
C1 could, a whole host of pedestrian level commercial uses you would expect in kind of the periphery of a downtown area. So somebody could come in, and submit a site plan for a commercial development on that site without the house anyway. So, there's nothing that protects it today. The zoning, even aside from the historic home that's currently on the property, we believe the zoning itself is more appropriate given, you've got commercial on the property's King frontage, and then, of course, down at Prospect Lake Wire. But between this site and then the property immediately to the east, it all makes sense as putting it together as a multifamily development area. So, again, this is straight zoning. It's a more appropriate zoning for this particular property. And the house could be demolished for a site development plan under the current zoning as much as it would be under the proposed zoning. So the zoning itself is really kind of a separate issue. Probably the bigger question is just getting an indication from the applicant, what are they doing to address the house, but it's certainly not a requirement. It's as it stands today.
Commissioner Music.
So, and I have three questions. The first one is, when you use the description, say, well, there's a historic house on the site now, are we using that historic as just a description?
It's just a description.
You're just describing it as a historic house. Okay, that's number one. Number two is, if the current owner chose not to come before us for a zoning change, you're saying that tomorrow he could put up another building, it could be torn down, and we'd never hear or see about it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And number three is, on the MF22 multifamily residence, how broad is that?
It's a fairly broad level of residential uses, and I believe it does include some small-scale commercial, associated commercial uses. So you could end up with something with a first floor commercial and upper stories that are residential.
So what we saw was just a rendering for ideas purposes. Nothing is binding. Nothing is so that they could tear it down and then something completely different could come up.
I mean, we have seen a concept, and we have been working on a concept related to this layout plan, and so this is likely what would be constructed on that site if the zoning were approved. But, things happen, things change. We could end up with another development proposal tomorrow that would comply with the multifamily, the MF22 zoning designation, and there's nothing, as long as you meet the land development code, there's nothing that binds that site plan to the site.
Another
Thank you.
storage facility.
Commissioner McCarley.
So, just to pull back and go back to all, I really am enjoying this discussion because we are not privy to what goes on. I mean, we can ask and come meet with community and economic development. They're very gracious in doing that, and they're a wonderful staff, and this is their wheelhouse and their lane. And we have to, we're multi-lane individuals, so we look at things from a lot of different angles. So I want to first say, I totally trust our staff. I want to add that in our roles as commissioners, this is sometimes, as Commissioner Madden says, the only time that we can kind of talk about this and kind of push on it. And sometimes we are in I am, in the mayor's absence, just as, guilty as ripping us through an agenda. And I think having a pause right here and having discussion, because we don't get the dialogue of all the pre-planning that you guys do. Like, we don't hear about that until it's already close to the end and close to the changing in the recommendations. So for us, I think we have to have grace on both sides that, yes, we love our staff, and we think we have the best community economic development staff in the state, if not the country. We love our planners. But I also think that sometimes when we have subject matter experts and all of the staff who are in this room, you guys do this work every single day. We have to look at all the work that's being done. We have to look at Lakeland Electric. We have to look at how we do preserve history. How do we also make sure that we have enough houses for people to live in? And how do we make sure that the stoplights work? And so we're being asked to do a lot of different things. And I think that we landed on it because it was a historic house. But I just want to encourage my fellow commissioners that we should be having these types of discussions to think about how Lakeland is going to look in 35 years and 50 years, because what we do now helps, and I don't care if my name's on a street or a building or anything like that. I want to make the right decisions. So all this, I think, is vital to how we progress forward, and I know it takes time, and I know it's very bristly, but it's not I want everybody in the team to know it's not a criticism of our staff. We're just trying to catch up to where y'all are.
And we're listening how the citizens are going to listen. When they read this in the paper, this is how they're going to be like, what? They're taking down the historic building? That's our job, is to be listening how a citizen would listen, not how a staffer or a planner or someone who's an expert in zoning. We are supposed to listen. We're voted in this position to be the citizens at this table, listening how they would listen, the ones who live in those neighborhoods and are going to be like, well, and so that's why we do sometimes have the shock and awe of this, is like, because we'll get the emails tomorrow and Sunday and next week after we pass it. People go like, how did that happen? So it does just happen and look rubber stamped and look like we knew the whole time, unless we ask these questions,
Which means maybe we should be doing more front-end ComDev downloads on the process that took place and what happened in planning and zoning and what they thought through as a little bit of the prelude to some of this, so that it isn't as abrupt.
Or we don't want to be reactionary.
Right.
I think that's the whole idea, is we like being proactive with you and not reactionary, because even just going back to the storage facility from 2 weeks ago, the amount of people who have said we had no idea that was happening, because planning and zoning does a first reading where you can go talk at the first reading, but at the second time it comes up at P&Z, you can't have public discourse. And so for us, it's just the opposite. You can't have public discourse in the first reading for the commission, but you can in the second. So that's very inconsistent and confusing to the public. And so we hear it at the first reading, we ask some questions, and then we kind of sit on this for a while, so then we come back for the second reading, and then that's when we can have the public discourse and have public come in on Monday. So I think it's just vitally important to the entire process that, A, it's not consistent, and again, staff works in it every day, so it comes second nature. And we just want to be as proactive as possible and supportive of the team as possible, but also supporting our constituents as well and asking the questions.
And we don't want to add uncertainty to certainty.
Right.
Because if we're the layer that does that, if we work on getting all these things done in advance, and then we pull plugs at the end, that makes developers
Right.
run.
Very squirmy.
And so we need to make sure we're in harmony on all this along the way.
Well, and I was saying, she made a good point about with the self-storage, that had a lengthy process. And it might not have been the ultimate answer that the residents liked, but now because it did, if it would have ended the first time, they would have really been disgruntled, feeling like that happened too fast. They did not know enough about it. And so even the folks who were disappointed, I was able to say, had we not had the process and you not been engaged and at the meetings and having the emails, it would have a neon green sign, it would have RV and boat storage near the back. So they had a better project because they were participating. And so the stakeholders knew. Do historic advocates know about this? Are they a stakeholder that should have been notified? I know that there's no formal mechanism at which we would notify historic if it's not in a historic district. But people who care about historic preservation do probably care about this building. So it's letting stakeholders who care about particular areas and particular things, that's our job, and we can't do that job if we don't know till the final hour. So we would, right now, I'm like, all historic preservation advocates, I hope you're listening. This is your last chance before Monday. I mean, that seems desperate. And then your first reading, we're kind of chastised a little bit about talking about it because it's not the real public hearing. So then it's Stephanie Madden trying to get on the phone and call historic preservation advocates. For them to not feel like something was done quickly or behind the scenes without letting them know, there has to be a mechanism at which we are having this conversation, the media included, could share the news so that when it's finally done, they might not like the outcome, maybe neither side will like it, but it'll be a better project at the end of the day because all the stakeholders had a voice. And I feel like that's what we do beautifully on these projects with our staff when we actually have the opportunity to engage the public. They might not be as happy, but they are a lot happier that they at least had some changes and some input and had some time to come to that decision along with staff.
So 2 refinements on that. One is it isn't a historic building, and it hasn't been declared one, nor is it an historic home.
It is historic because it's over 100 years. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
But there's no declaration
Right.
on this particular
Yes.
one. So that would be at least an item of why this might be a little different. We're not doing something that has been designated. And 2, in first reading agenda studies, we can have all the disclosures we want, and all the explanations we want, and we bring that material to first reading. So there are many, so we won't do it in the meeting itself, but we can get an understanding, and we can use that as an opportunity to talk about projects, so we should. So if there's anything that is a misgiving, that's when if you want to augment it early and you want to get more discussion going, and that allows 2 more weeks then before we ever get to the second reading. And there's a lot of work that can happen in that 2-week period of time. So don't be shy in a first reading to ask for an explosion of all that information. And I don't want to ramrod a meeting. I want us to feel as comfortably exposed to whatever it is.
Well, I was blaming myself.
Yeah, I'm in this together. We're all in this together. We want to have this be as long as necessary and as short as possible. So, and if there's any tone otherwise, please let me know.
Okay, well, I want to shout out to the people who live there, documentary, to go now or forever lose your opportunity to see that historic home.
Or have someone who wants to move it,
Yes, or anyone who wants to move it.
Okay.
If I could win the lottery.
Anything else on this first reading, Chuck, you'd like to add?
I think our first reading.
I'm sorry, on the second reading. I apologize, thank you.
I don't want to go through it again. Reading.
Mr. Roos, anything to add into this conversation from your perspective?
No, but.
Yeah, do the but part.
I mean, we appreciate the commission's comments. The struggle I think we have at the staff level is that there is no legal protection for this structure. So as this applicant has moved through the process, it's very challenging for us to introduce an impediment to their plan without any legal backing to introduce that impediment and an infinite amount of uncertainty So, I think about this particular applicant having acquired the site and having expended probably a significant amount of money to this point to get to where we are, and to have a concern that isn't really based in any legal designation brought up so late in the game. And this is the same applicant who, in our historic district, East Thornton and Orange Street and Lake, and on East Lemon Street, has developed similar projects within historic districts and has worked with another developer to relocate a historic house from Orange Street that impacted his project there over to Lime Street. So I don't think this applicant is insensitive to concerns of historic significance. But of course, most developers won't stay developers long if they are spending money on things they're not required to spend money on.
And that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
That's really great information. Like, that's helpful to us in the proactive state of this, is knowing that, prior. And I know we have public issues of public, disclosing things because you have deals that, you might be a non-compete, or, we have to be cognizant of all the rules and regulations that y'all have to go through. But that's very valuable information to know. So thank you for sharing that.
Commissioner Music.
It's, and what I enjoy about this is looking around and realizing how similar we are in so many ways as Lakelanders, but also how different we are in our different background. Nikki and I were up in Savannah and Charleston. We always Google oldest house and we go tour it. Always. But what was interesting is we went and toured one, and I'd have to look back through some pictures. And what's interesting about it is over the historical time of this house, and it was right on the water, and it had a lot of iterations, right? Changes, balconies, front, back, all this kind of stuff had changed. But it was a shipbuilder that was there, and so they tied it to something. And we appreciate that. So I mean, I am with you on saving history. But one of the toughest things that we have, I believe, as commissioners, is when we take something that is existing and we approve for it to change into something else. And when I think of developments, but where I live on Beacon, I've gone to the library and looked back through some old pictures. At a certain point, there was groves. Oh, yeah. And somebody was mad that the groves got taken down to put my house up. And it's the same with every other subdivision. And that's where I'm leaning back to Brian's comments, is when people are reaching out to me, they know that you're an advocate because they're hearing you again. You're an advocate for this, so they're reaching out to you and saying, save this or help me with this. People that are reaching out to me are the people that are in my field, and that is the developers. And so they're yelling at me and saying, I want to spend money. I have spent money. And yet, now you guys are stymieing or you're doing stuff like that. So, I just want to come alongside saying I'm grateful for everybody's opinion, and I'm glad that when we leave this, we are, carrying stuff on our shoulders because we're hurt from a comment. But at the same time, I do want to save everything that is historically significant, everything, without in causing an overdue issue for somebody who. There's a lot of music from the 70s that's old, but it ain't classic. Right? And
that's my area.
But it is the same with buildings. I mean, it is old, and it's a beautiful building, and I would love, if I'm listening, someone's listening to me, pick it up and move it. That's what I would love to see. So, thank you.
Right. Got it. Ditto. Any other comments at all from commissioners on this? And this is a great discussion, and it's formative anyway beyond the scope of this particular project, so thank you for it.
All right, we'll give that discussion. I'll just briefly go through 1, 2, and 3 as well. One is a proposed daycare facility at the Family Worship Center off of Main on the east side of Main Street. Chuck can go through that if you like. I'm just going to briefly summarize them and let you guys speak up if you want to hear more. Number 2 is the old Toyota dealership on the west side of Memorial Boulevard, on the south of that. They are proposing to add a vehicle storage area, and this would also recognize the existing used car dealership and make that a conforming use. And then number 3 is a proposed new bar concept, new bar on the first floor of the place where the Lakeland Lofts, that cigar bar is, at the corner of Tennessee and Main. So if you'd like to hear any more about that, Chuck can tee those up for you.
Sure. Let me go back to the back to the beginning, yeah.
I was just asking if they want to hear anything, not necessarily.
Commissioner Mann.
Yeah, I think we had a great discussion regarding the bar. I have kind of walked that little area, just kind of thinking about what it would look like with a new alcove open, and, have we had any feedback from Black and Brew or any of the neighbors? That's what I'm curious about, because we kind of talked about, like, compatibility. Someone had mentioned, if you're next to Linksters late at night, it doesn't exactly feel like you're at the coffee shop versus, and then if you're, bookend by two bars on both sides, just to have that compatibility and feel along that sidewalk. Have we heard from any of the other neighbors?
I haven't seen any comments expressing any concerns with the concept. And so at this point, it seems like that folks are supportive of the plan.
They know the owner, they feel confident that, we have the, parameters in place, like I think Commissioner Music said, as long as we have those kind of fence posts, and we have a way to be able to say, this is getting too noisy, or it's bleeding out into the sidewalk, or it's affecting the business of the neighbor. Those are in the
In the conditions, for example, music within the open air area in the front of the building is not allowed unless there's a special event, that goes through the special event permit process. So that's something that's written in as a specific condition. So I think that in terms of anything that would come up from an adjacent property owner, we've got appropriate conditions in place to address that. And of course,
do they have food too, or no food?
It's primarily going to be a bar, so they may have food, but it's not a primary source of the revenue or sales for the use.
We talked about saturation and maybe getting some number comparisons. Did we have an opportunity to do any of that?
Go ahead, John.
That's something we've been talking about, trying to get something together in terms of getting a workshop scheduled. So we're still having those internal conversations and are working towards the workshop.
And I think you're going to probably be getting a position from the LDDA as well. And so we're waiting for all of that to kind of come together. And then the plan was to have a workshop.
Commissioner Music.
Yeah, I was just going to say that LDDA retreat we had, we brought that up and are working towards that end of what does that even look like, ratio, percentage, numbers, things of that nature. But also, we did meet with this tenant, and everybody was on board. The gentleman with Linksters is on the LDDA board, and he was there, had no issues. And every time we do something, because I know Black and Brew is right there as well, he's very vocal and had no issues or opposition. So.
Great, thanks.
Other questions for staff?
Okay. All right, Palmer.
All right, those are the all for second reading. Consider possible action on Monday. Under CRA, we have several items. The first is our proposed funding agreements with Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation and Hispanic Business Initiative Fund, better known as BBIC and Prospera. You'll recall that this came before you back in August of 2022 when we were considering how to use and distribute the ARPA funds from the federal government. And because of auditing requirements and issues like that, it was determined that it would be better to possibly fund these through another source. And the source that came up was CRA funding. They have money in their budget for this type of thing. And so that has resulted in these two funding agreements with the CRA. Under the agreements, they're both three-year agreements. BBIC, we get a total of $375,000 over that three-year period. In Prospera, we get a total of $225,000 over that three-year period. They would provide technical assistance, consulting, conduct seminars, that type of thing for small businesses, primarily in the Midtown and downtown CRA districts. We've got some deliverables in the contract that they have to meet. They have a reporting period where they report the different activities that they've undertaken during the immediately preceding reporting period as a condition of receiving payments. So there is some accountability built into the agreements. Valerie is here from the CRA, can go into more detail if you would like.
I have a quick question.
Commissioner McCarley.
We had a really good meeting with DEO when we were at the state for City of Lakeland Day, so I don't know if that information got passed along to you with regard to these types of projects. We'll get it to you.
I have the brochures on my desk.
Yes, Emily has it. So there's just some opportunity for funding for more initiatives like this. And we all, Commissioner Madden, Mayor Mutz, and I, and Emily all it piqued our interest. We were meeting with DEO, so I just want to make sure that you get that to your desk because it can help kind of come alongside these things.
Not just CRA though, with also Jason.
Yeah,
We'll get to you too.
Right. We're actually looking at expanding what services that BBIC and Prospera will be offering and how we can partner with expanding CRA incentives with the services, the businesses that they offer their consulting with.
Yes, City Manager.
Yeah, thank you. I just would like to make a quick comment about, how we got to this point very briefly and just kind of remind everybody that this was the initial request that we received from the chamber. And then working through that was the realization that, these services could be supported better through the CRA. The chamber was requesting funding from the ARPA funds that the city was going to receive. And so I just want to clarify that because there's still a few that I get emails and contacts from that are still under this idea that this money is going to the chamber, and it is not, even though the request and the introduction of BBIC and Prospera came through the chamber. Instead, this will be, funded by the CRA, and there'll be coordination between the CRA and those entities, not the chamber.
Excellent. Commissioner Simmons.
Yes. I would like, what's her name?
Valerie.
If possible, like Valerie to kind of elaborate on the services that both entities will be providing.
The table here. So each agency will be providing counseling, individual counseling with businesses within each CRA district, and also providing outreach services and technical assistance. So that can take different forms. I know BBIC has already offered the opportunity to host mixers. That's just to get into the community and start building relationships and getting their name known here. Prospera will probably do the same thing. I don't know if they're going to title it as a mixer, but they're going to establish themselves within the community so that they can become known, get familiar, build those relationships. One-on-one counseling can be in person, it can be over the phone, it can be virtual, and I know that their outreach efforts are going to be very much in person, and they're going to try to get that networking established. The chamber office has made themselves available to host a lot of these events, and also BBIC has established a relationship with the Well in Midtown, so they are going to be established and starting to provide those services in the Well. Prospera is going to look at starting to provide those services at the Well and possibly other opportunities throughout Midtown. So we're starting to feel this out. I know the reporting is very important so that we can see what those outcomes are on a quarterly basis, but we're pretty excited to get this
So you'll be getting quarterly reports?
Yes, sir.
Where's Prospera? Where are they from, Prospera?
They are actually statewide. The regional office we're working with is actually based out of Tampa, but they provide services within Orlando, Miami, in the northern region of Florida. They're a statewide agency.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And both can link to funding opportunities.
Yes.
Too, which is another important aspect.
Yeah, absolutely, particularly for small businesses. So they will provide the technical support and opportunities for funding for small businesses or guidance for those opportunities.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes.
And both will be here on Monday to answer your questions relative to their services. They'll be accompanied by their chamber supporters and advocates as well.
Wonderful. And then I saw that Commissioner Music.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that, because I'm going to need to read this over the weekend then. The only question I have then really is more of a CRA question. If the CRA is funding it, how, and the CRA's designation is to help people within a certain geographical area, how are we going to keep somebody from Winter Haven coming over here? I mean, we're not obviously going to keep somebody from coming over, but is that at all a concern, or how are we going to handle that?
So our hope is that their service will be provided to all. So they're not necessarily going to limit someone if they're not geographically located from our areas. But we hope that by providing the service within our CRA that we're going to be enticing that business to also be located within our CRA, because we're going to be revising our incentives to attract those locations within the CRA district. If they get the assistance from BBIC or Prospera, we will be incentivizing those businesses that are being consulted by either service provider.
And I think it's excellent. I mean, we certainly have a need, and I'm a little disappointed we don't have some organic inside groups that can do this, but being able to bring somebody out and be an example for us and a help to those is great. So are they?
Long history too.
That's right, and yeah, they did not certainly just pop up. So is the plan then, part of the money that they are going to have, if they're going to set up shop when they do, is they will be paying rent or per diem at the well?
Yes, they will be working with Dr. Sally and setting up her services there.
Well, that's good.
But there are milestones in the agreement. There's a schedule, actually, that specifies that they have to provide a certain amount of each type of service to businesses within the CRA. So there is a nexus.
So not only are they getting their milestones are more specific and narrow. So
if they provide those minimum, we're okay with them providing advice to other people, but they have to provide a minimum amount to CRA businesses.
Good distinction.
Yeah, that's good.
Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. They're getting, from the outside looking in, from the past, it looks like it's redundant almost from one standpoint, that two different groups are providing the same service, and we're going to pay double personnel for the same service. But that's the only, unless they can assure me that this is not going to be the fact, that this is some restraint I have on it. That's been my concern all along from day one. It was 3 presentations, now we're narrowed it down to 2. Where it seems like one facilitates this as opposed to 2, and we're getting 2 people trying to do the same thing. As Bill's going to tell them something, I'm going to go meet with him and tell them something when Bill might could tell it better than I could. Or that's my...
It'd be vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that there's a cultural disposition to this that you have to take into effect, which we probably tend to walk around and not talk about, but it's real. There's greater trust for both our Black community and our Hispanic community in dealing with people that are like them on this kind of advice and counsel. It just is true. And that's an okay thing. So part of what we do together is provide these overall services to make sure that they're, as we do through other entities and agencies that exist in our city, this is a way to ensure that cultural group feels well heard and matches a little bit in understanding with the things that might be unique.
Well, I concur. Again, it says for all below that as well.
And it is.
And I wanted to make sure it's for all. We don't want to leave any one group out or make one group inclusive and not the other. And so that's another component as well. But I understand what you're saying. And again, it just seems that you could have them consolidate and do a better job, but I think Brian was going to allude to something.
The mayor did an excellent job explaining the optic of overlap or redundancy, but I would encourage you to ask the BBIC and Prospera representatives that are here on Monday that same question. Prospera, in particular, during the CRA Advisory Board meeting, did a very good job explaining sort of those barriers and impediments to particularly Hispanic-owned businesses. And so I hope that their answer will bring more comfort to you that though there appears to be overlap, they really are serving vastly different constituencies.
This is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
It can be less money, in my opinion, but this is a lot of money.
If it leverages well, it can make a lot of money.
Well,
for our citizens.
And recall that the Chamber, on behalf of BBIC and Prospera's original request for ARPA in August of last year was for $800,000.
Yeah, this is a trend already.
So how much is it now?
6.
Combined?
6.
And by the way, you did an excellent job explaining that overlap.
Okay. Well, it's an issue. Listen, I can remember, and this is a personal side, but I can remember when I owned a car dealership, the importance of having service advisors, which is a contentious area. When you come in to have your car repaired, you're already mad because you have to spend money anyway, and it's a contentious area. And the more upset you are, the more frustrated you might be, the more you want to talk to somebody that looks more like you.
And just speak Spanish maybe or something.
Yeah, and so if and it's difficult always to try and hire the breadth of people that you want in those rooms. But it's a reality because people want to be heard by people that there's an opportunity to have an inference from a trust level of understanding that we don't always necessarily, it might be available, but we don't necessarily assume that it's available. And that's what we're trying to accomplish in this, plain and simple. That's how you understand people well. Yes.
I think that's a good point. I don't want to speak for Prospera, but that is a theme that has come up in the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Council, is just for new residents and people coming from Latin America into the United States and just trying to understand the system of government. Where do you go for this? And when you get into the business world, starting a business and the different nuances that exist that we all may or may not know, that learning curve can be even greater. So I do think there's a role for both. Commissioner Reed and Prospera can speak to that in more detail, and the chamber as well. I thought they did a good job of explaining why they are advocating for both. Valerie did, if I remember correctly, BBIC, they work with other CRAs, right? They have historically, they've been in other, I know they're in other areas, but just their involvement with other CRAs.
They are involved in other CRA districts, and I know they have agreements with other economic development departments and counties. So they have an existing contract with Pinellas County Economic Development Department, Hillsborough County contracts with CDBG funds that are administered by the City of Tampa, and I believe also with Clearwater. So they're familiar with government funding, reporting, and a lot of this agreement was based on those funding agreements that we kind of massaged to our reporting needs.
Thank you. That's good information.
Any other roundouts on this conversation that you'd like to make? Okay.
Just one final question. When would the agreement become effective, if passed?
Upon execution by both of the parties.
Pardon?
Upon execution by both of the parties, the city and Prospera and BBIC.
So if we're passed, it will become almost immediately?
Sure.
Okay.
Very fast.
Mayor, if I may just allow Valerie's efforts on this. She rejoined us in September of last year.
Yes.
We were already well underway discussing sort of the broad possibilities with BBIC and Prospera and the Chamber. And I'm sure she didn't share with me her exact feelings when I handed all of that to her and said, here, go figure it out.
It was a good thing.
But has spent, absolutely. We got much better product than if I had stayed involved more directly. But here we are now, 6 months later, with what I think is the fruits of not only her labor, but the Chamber's as well.
Wonderful. Good. All right. Next item, sir.
Next item is a infrastructure funding agreement with Lakewire Apartments LLC. They're developing a multifamily project known as Peachtree Flats on the north side of Lakewire. That is proposed to include an 84-unit market rate apartment building that will be 4 stories in height and a separate 2-tier parking structure. They had come before the City Commission for tax increment financing several months ago. And had originally requested a 10-year financing agreement with 75% reimbursement. The City Commission ultimately approved only a 5-year TIF at 75% reimbursement with the representation that they could work with the CRA on some other possible incentives focused on infrastructure and site improvements. Several site infrastructure improvements have been identified. Those include 3-phase primary power to be extended from the southwest corner of George Jenkins Boulevard, Martin Luther King, to the subject property, which I believe the subject property is just to the east of the Zora building.
It is.
Yeah. Underground stormwater detention, street lighting, some sidewalk and crosswalk upgrades, and street side landscaping and irrigation. So the developer will construct all these different infrastructure improvements, and in exchange, once they provide us the proof of completion, adequate completion, the CRA would reimburse them for those items in an amount not to exceed $775,000. These infrastructure improvements will not only benefit this particular site, but also puts that infrastructure in place for anybody else along that area of Lakewire. So there's an added public benefit to all of this. I believe I've touched on the main items of this. The CRA Advisory Board considered this at its March meeting and is recommending approval. So that's recommended for your approval, and Valerie can answer additional questions.
Questions by commissioners? Commissioner Simmons?
I just wondered if we could bring up this picture, the Virginia Avenue, New
It's in
York.
the attachment.
Page 11 for the attachment.
Well, it doesn't have, I don't have the page number.
Is that what she's looking at?
It says,
Yeah. It's page 11. It's the aerial view.
The bottom of the water main adjustments. IT security right there for you.
Seriously, I'm still impressed that Palmer
That's the
put
only
that
thing I
up
can
last
do.
week.
No, that was, I know. I gotta go back and watch the video and try to.
We'll leave the mouse alone from now on.
Yeah, you set that bar, you're in trouble, you know?
Thank you.
Just make sure you remember that for his review.
Exceeds expectations.
What you want in an attorney, right?
We like attorneys that can work computers. Good.
Keep going.
Next one.
Nope. It's the aerial Google Earth. There you go.
There you go.
Just blow that one up.
Doesn't know. Right click. So is that right of the
I was just hopeful that you could talk, like, the things that are delineated in here with the traffic improvements and where the water is going to be extended or the power. If you could kind of point it out on that picture, it's helpful. But I'm being Commissioner Reed here, pointing a picture on that.
Okay.
You can actually slide your illustrations up and it'll show that.
Plus, we can look at the other building while we're doing this, too.
So in each of the pictures, they have to get, and I'll do my Vanna White impression as best as I can, they're bringing primary power from MLK and George Jenkins, and they're extending it to the site. This crosswalk improvement is what's highlighted in this picture, because there's existing connectivity here, but there's no existing connectivity here, so this crosswalk needs to be upgraded. The underground detention is going to be located, let me make sure I'm in the right corner of the site, it's going to be located in this corner of the, oops, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong property.
Yeah.
On this property. And they're going to be vacating an existing alleyway that's here, and there's existing utilities within this alley that needs to be removed. And the water main needs to be adjusted, which is, contractor's going to be verifying the field depth. That alley water main adjustment is here, and I have utility guys in the room. They could probably point this out way better than I could. Street sides, landscaping will be on all four sides, but specifically the enhancements will be on this Magnolia Street. That's what they have in their attachment. All of these sidewalks will be ADA accessible, so right now they're okay, but they're going to be improved to be ADA accessible, and the new water and sewer services connections will all be improved on the New York Avenue side. So that's what's in all of these
It says
attachments
84 units, but have you seen any preliminary design as like where the parking or where the units will be?
Yeah, so all of the units are going to be facing Peachtree. The parking deck, it's actually a parking structure, is going to be located on Magnolia Street, and they're going to have an internal kind of amenity area where they'll have a pool. I think they're going to have a small clubhouse cabana area. So all of the apartments are going to be, it's two separate structures, so all the apartments are going to be located on the southern half. The northern half is going to be the parking
So
structure.
best practice would be to have that multifamily right next to some retail, mixed use, right?
It would.
Yes.
For everyone who's sick of my car line, that's car line on Magnolia right now in the aerial view. You can see how it stacks. That is not even the full car line of stacking to go into LCMA. It stacks all the way down Virginia on one side. Actually, there is a car in Virginia that's stacked waiting in car line. And then it actually spills out onto Peachtree the first 3 weeks of schools and onto Lake Wire. Just an FYI for those of you who don't do car line.
That's why Stephanie
Believe that's a
Madden
black
cheated
Suburban.
and just dropped off at the Lake Wire. I had a top.
And when I was there were still other buildings that hadn't been taken out yet. So.
I made my son ride a skateboard all the way back to Beacon Hill instead of being in that
She's a
line.
better mother. I sat there and spoiled my entitled children.
To that end, in this scenario, they can access Virginia from the south to get into the garage. And it wouldn't even have to be on Magnolia to interfere with the car line.
No, but
I
the
understand.
car line goes down Virginia, just
Also.
FYI. Yes, onto Peachtree and onto Lake Wire. First 3 weeks of school, it goes to Lake Wire. I'm just for visual purposes.
But I would like to just not glaze over that. I mean, that is a, I mean.
Finally.
Well, I'm putting myself back as the developer building something, and if I'm going and I'm there in summer or I'm there in the morning or evening and there's not an issue, what steps are we taking to not do their job for them, right? I mean, if I'm going to go buy a house, I go all times of the day to see what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So how is that looking, and what are our future plans for that cut-through road to minimize people from being frustrated at us a year and a half from now?
It's a nice little brick street. I love that.
Our biggest short-term plan, and this impacts not only these two proposed developments and Lawton Childs, but also Prospect Lake Wire, is to engage the school district staff about reopening Lake Wire
Lake Wire,
Drive.
yeah.
Completing that, will create additional challenges in the short term for the school, but the connectivity benefits long-term to everyone are immeasurable.
Commissioner McCarley.
Just one of the reasons I ran, I know y'all are all going to be excited to hear this, is the first week of school that I was sitting on Peachtree Street, and school happens every time the same time of year. We started building that connectivity sidewalk the first week of school when everybody was backed up on Lake Wire, which was super fun
Yes.
for all people involved.
Commissioner Music.
I have a follow-up on that, Brian. When we reach out to them, meaning the county, the school board,
Yes, sir.
right? And we do. I mean, how receptive are they? I mean, can you get meetings with them? Can you talk? Are they coming to site, or are you banging your head against that beautiful brick road? I mean, what's happening?
We'll let you know.
Okay.
What a wise answer that was.
With the sage over there, yeah.
But we can say, you can't just keep hijacking our neighborhoods with your carpool lines with all the magnet, charter, public.
Right.
People should just walk to school.
Yeah, neighborhood schools.
I certainly didn't want that to sound flippant.
and I understand the answer.
We have
Yeah.
not engaged the district staff fully on this issue yet. So we want to talk to them, express the commission's desire that it be considered and evaluated, and then talk to them in earnest about what their sort of anticipated, expected conflicts will be and how we can work to address those. And we do that every day with a host of stakeholders. So, I'll be optimistic that we can see that through. And I think it actually will benefit the school because now you got other ways out. Right now, to Commissioner McCarley's point, Peachtree Street is it.
Yeah.
It's the only way out.
Yeah.
Or in.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, when you go out, sorry, really quick, so you line up and you go north and east, and then you queue through the LCMA parking lot when they open the gate. So you queue through there, so that when they redid this years before I was there, the district and the city tried to work through that queuing on site. So there is queuing on site once that gate's open. And so when you have multiple children at different schools, that's why people are parked and waiting, because if they can get the middle school kid first and then go get in car line for elementary, because Lincoln feeds into Lawton, that's what becomes a little tricky. But you spill back out to South Florida, so you don't come back. Nobody's leaving school and coming back down Virginia. It is a good flow because you go through the parking lot and you zigzag around, and then you're pushed back out to South Florida. But then to go to Lincoln to get your kids, because it's a feeder school, then you have to go back down Lake Wire, wrap around and go back up Kathleen, and then go into that neighborhood. So transportation for the school district, I think our staff is really good at reaching out to the school district and their facilities team to discuss these things they have on other site development, and even asking questions about newer schools. But transportation is one of the biggest challenges for our school district, our school students right now, and expense. It's the biggest part of their budget. The average bus time for a student in County Public Schools, their commute is 45 minutes. That's the average. So just for people that don't have kids in school or don't go to the Polk County Public Schools meetings like Sean and I do and engage in those different levels, it's a big deal. And I'm glad, thank you for kind of echoing it, because I don't do it in jest. It's a real issue for our school district, of which we're what,
Besides
the number
Rhode
third?
Island.
We're the number third or fourth in the state right now, our
Should
school
not be
district
this big.
size. So.
Commissioner Simmons.
Yeah, I'm looking at the $775,000 that we're virtually paying for the infrastructure improvements on behalf of the developer. How much impact fees are we receiving for this particular project? Any idea?
No non-utility impact fees. This project is located in what's called the core improvement area, where services are, by and large, not impacted to the degree that they are outside the core. So the commission for several years now has had that adopted area within which, I say, non-utility impact fees, transportation, parks and recreation, police, and fire are not charged.
So I'm familiar that the Lake Wire area has that designation, but that also goes for developers as well. I mean, I know it applies to developers who build single-family homes, but it's also for multifamily developers. That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
And there's property taxes on a long-term basis that come from that part of the other upside. And we don't do a good job of that, by the way. And I think Commissioner McLeod brought this up once earlier, that we talk about the CRA money. We don't talk about the inbounds coming back the other way on a longer-term basis. And I think sometimes when we make these presentations, we need to do that because we need to recognize that this TIF money is an incentive for us on a long-term basis to grow the opportunities that we have within the city to build a tax base that applies, that is utilized to do all the things that we need to do.
Get it back.
We get a return on investment. Okay.
Also, even though those impact fees are waived in the core improvement area, it is really the reasoning behind CRAs is to be able, to take care of blight or need for infrastructure and the like. And so here's an example of that.
Great. That's another end. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Again, that was the question I had, and Brian, the TIF money is not going to be to reimburse our $775,000. They're getting 5 years of 75%. They don't use that money to reimburse us for the crews. That was a question I had. And of course, this will have a big play on the property next door as well from the parking they wanted to discuss. And I didn't know they had all the big issues. I know they have the Montessori school down by my property where I live, down on the lake and behind the church, and they're parked up all along the street, and they come and park in the street where I try to get out. I've got to wait for people to make a U-turn so I can get out the street, and then I'm driving on a one-lane road going the wrong way, for almost half a mile, hoping nobody comes down the road. I got a bigger car.
All right. Anything else? All right. We'll go to the city manager.
I got one more item under CRA.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. You probably do it.
That is a task authorization with Strong Trowel to Architects for architectural, engineering, and construction administration services for some improvements within the right-of-way on East Rose Street. And we're talking about the area just to the east of the intersection of East Rose Street and South Lake Avenue, all the way to the west side of the intersection of East Rose Street and North Ingram Avenue. So all along there, under this task authorization, they'll do all the design, engineering, and engineering work to design some improvements that may include sidewalk improvements, lighting, signage, site furnishings, and possibly some proposed fencing upgrades on the city-owned property along Rose Street there. not to exceed amount for Strong Child Services would be $163,600. The CRA considered this at their April meeting and is recommending approval to the City Commission. We have funding for this in the FY23 Midtown East Main District budget.
Questions by Commissioners? Commissioner Reed.
Do you know when this will start, if we pass it?
Should start May 1st, actually, is what the task officer indicates.
I come on this street every day coming here, so, okay.
And this is not, I mean, the construction won't start on May 1st. This is for the design and engineering, and then they also do construction administration once construction gets started, but that should be a little while before the construction gets started.
Other questions? All right. Now, City Manager.
Thank you. I have two items, and then I have two verbals after that, if I may. The first item is regarding the mid-year table of organization modifications and needed appropriations for FY23. These modifications involve adding, deleting, pay adjustments, reclassifying positions to meet departmental operational needs or improve service delivery. And this mid-year is a process that we go through each year. Most of the changes this year had either no cost or were offset by the departments through other organizational changes or reductions. And this is specifically related to personnel type actions. And so the net savings related to these changes this year is $4,175. And to break that down, in the general fund, based upon the changes, there's a net reduction of $777. In the purchasing and stores fund, there's a net reduction of $2,731. And in solid waste management, there's a net increase of $3,750. And at Lakeland Electric Fund, there's a net increase of $3,933. And again, the total net on that is $4,175. And that's a reduction in cost. And so an example of one of these would be where we have a customer billing specialist that's in the finance department, but handles billing related to code enforcement, and a request coming from those departments to transfer that employee, that customer billing specialist, over to community and economic development because their specific tasks are related to billing related to code enforcement. And so that's the part related to the personnel actions that I described previously. In addition, it's requested that we authorize an appropriation in estimated revenues, and that's in the amount of $395,000 in the Fleet Management Fund to be funded by a transfer from our unappropriated surplus in the Solid Waste Fund. And this is for the purchase of a new commercial front-end loader, and this is related to meeting additional service needs as we continue to see our commercial operations grow within the city. And so those are the requests based on the mid-year changes that have come from each of our departments.
Questions on that, Commissioner Musing?
I was curious why those two were grouped together.
The second paragraph is a big paragraph.
Yeah. I mean, why is the appropriation not separate? Why are we not just asking for the appropriations? It seems to me that we're lumping two things that are not directly correlated together.
Yeah, through our mid-year process, it's not only related to personnel, but the departments also, where they may not have budgeted this in the current budget, this is their opportunity to come back and, based on this need that we now have, make that adjustment.
Okay, so moving in, asking, and
It's just separating personnel from non-personnel requests, mid-year requests.
Okay.
But it is part of the same process, the program modification.
So kind of the way that I laid that out is those two categories. We have those things related to personnel where maybe we're adding or deleting or reclassifying or reassigning a position, and then we have those non-personnel capital type items that again weren't budgeted, but now the departments have the mid-year opportunity.
And typically in the past, the non-personnel ones would wait until fiscal year. This is obviously a sourcing issue with getting another front-end loader, which you've seen on separate items, to your point.
Yeah, and that's what I think what made me I was just curious why it wasn't separated, but okay, thank you.
From a finance standpoint, it's an appropriation. Singularly. Cool picture.
next item is, this item is related to the contract that was negotiated with our members of the Fraternal Order of Police at the Police Department. And this is where in the contract, it was negotiated that they be provided a specific type of physical exams. We have 225 sworn officers, and based on the process to determine which vendor would provide those services, the cost of that is $67,500. Again, this is part of what was negotiated in the contract, and so it's recommended that we enter into a 3-year agreement with the company, which is United Diagnostic Services, in the amount, again, of $67,500 annually. And in the contract, there were provisions that would cap the amount that the city would pay for these types of physical exam services.
Not to exceed 67.5.
No, it was based on, I think, a per physical amount. So the 67.5 is just multiplying out that cost times the number of officers. And I think in the contract language, it was specific to how much per exam. Mike, is that correct?
$300 per person, with the idea being that if at some point the commission were to expand the number of officers, then, and that's an up to, because it's not required that these officers take these additional physicals. It's an opportunity to allow them to if they choose to.
Okay, great. Questions on this one? Your 2 verbals, sir.
Okay, thank you. The first verbal, just want to bring awareness to our staff and to the commission that I have appointed our former retired chief of police, Ruben Garcia, under a contract arrangement to our position of emergency manager. That'll be for up to a 2-year term and can then be extended if there's a need beyond that. Ruben will come in and, with 35 years of service, public safety service specific to the city of Lakeland, we couldn't bring a better person in to do some of the work that we need in the emergency management field. Some of the things that Ruben's going to be working on and is already working on, he joined us on Monday, is we need to update our emergency management plan and make it current. There are things that in previously emergency management plans really didn't exist. Things like how do you handle emergency response when you have, civil unrest type events. So Ruben's going to be working on an update to the emergency management plan. We also need to start having emergency-related training for staff, and so Ruben's going to be working to implement that. And then he will also be available, for any emergency response needs that we have. And so I'm just happy to announce that we have Ruben Garcia now on staff as our emergency manager.
Welcome back.
I think Ruben is in the room with us, so good to have Ruben back.
You might not recognize him in his new clothes.
Much more comfortable.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ruben.
It'd be great to have you here.
Oh, yeah.
The other verbal that I have is the commission's aware that earlier this week I authorized an emergency purchase authorization related to repair needs for our Lakeland Electric Unit 5. It is an emergency, especially in the sense that we're coming up on our peak demand season, and we need to have Unit 5 operating so that we don't risk any shortages done by the contractor, which is Siemens. And so that's why the process and why it was deemed an emergency necessity.
Good, Commissioner McCarley.
This didn't come up at utility at all, like this, so I saw that you guys had the work and you looked at everything through the month of February, and then it was deemed kind of emergency at the end of March, when you had that information. So how does that typically happen if something like this comes to be? We heard about it Monday, and now we're here on Friday, so did we know at the end of March that it was going to be this huge of an expenditure?
No, there was an evolution on it. We knew it was an emergency on February 23rd. We didn't know 23rd, 24th. Okay. We knew it was an emergency after it tripped, and we got into it and realized that we would not be able to just bring it back up and put it online. When it came off, it made some noise. It did not have any vibration or temperature excursions that made it look like it necessarily was something that we couldn't put back online, and we would have liked to have put it back online because we had an outage scheduled 1 week later that we were going to go into a planned outage. But we heard some rub in there, it just didn't sound right, so we went ahead and did some borescope exam. We did what we could do, found some concern when we did that, so we had to pull the top shell off, and I'm talking about, the gigantic steel shell that you have to pull off to get in there and look at it. We pulled that off and started to do further investigation, and every step of the way, this literally went from we might be able to put it back online to it might be something between $4 and $10 million worth of damage to now the number we're looking at is $21 million. So, and now part of that, and it was an evolutionary thing. There was no point we could have come to the utility committee with a complete, here's what it's going to cost, here, I know exactly what the scope is, and here's what it's going to cost. And some of that was trying to nail the price down with the OEM. Some of the numbers went north of $21 million, and we talked with them when we got them back down to around $21 million. So by the time we got all that finalized to the point we could actually say, and I didn't want to come tell the utility committee it's $8 million, and the next time it's $20 million. So by the time we got all that packaged together, knew exactly what it was going to be, had a not to exceed scope. All along the way, as I say, it was, as Sean said, we need to do it every day, and we kept telling them we got to get to work on this. So by the time we got that was over the last weekend into Monday, Tuesday time frame, and Sean went ahead and approved us moving forward with it. Siemens was working on it in their shop, but, and I want to mention, when it first came off, they did not have sufficient manpower to work it around the clock to take it apart. That's one reason the analysis took a month, where it normally would take a week to 2 weeks. We were concerned about them having that same situation in their shop in Charlotte, not having sufficient manpower or taking that manpower and moving it to another unit that was willing to sign off and give them the go-ahead. That happened. So they did have the manpower to work it around the clock, 24 hours. So we wanted to get them the signed off approval, keep going, keep moving, so we could get it back in more like mid-May instead of a month later than that. Because power prices get very unpredictable when the weather heats up. So it really never was, we never felt that there was any alternative. We were not going to decommission the unit. We didn't really have a good alternative to that cost. There is no alternative to the OEM. They have the drawings, the parts, the rights to work on it. It's not like we could go out and hire another contractor. So we felt it was kind of an inevitable path, and we needed to keep moving quickly. So we would very much like to come to the utility committee and make a presentation. We get everybody knowledgeable and on board before we, make a move like that. But the nature of this business is that sometimes you have to pull the trigger pretty quickly, as quickly as you can in the process, to make sure that we don't lose more time and end up costing ourselves millions of dollars in replacement power later on.
I really appreciate that detail, Mike. Thank you for all of that. I know that's hard to put in an email, even though you guys provided a lot of information. My only concern was there wasn't a red flag warning at utility of, hey, this is going on, unless I missed it. This is what's going on. The number is obviously daunting, and yes, they could have looked at like 30 million, and I wouldn't want you to come in and say it was 8 and it ended up being 21, so I really appreciate that. I just was sort of taken off guard. I was sort of surprised on Monday to see it, so I think some kind of information ahead of the curve of, we got a problem, and we're working the problem to a solution. We don't have the solution yet. Like, for me, that would have been a little more helpful, because I was planning to take 15 high school kids to Tallahassee, at 7 a.m. Tuesday morning, and I get an email at 5:47 sitting in the parking lot at Publix buying food to take on said trip in my volunteer capacity, and I'm like, that's a lot of money at 5:47 p.m. in the afternoon to look at and try to wrap my head around, the information that was provided. So I was just thinking, well, maybe I missed something at utility that I didn't hear correctly when we were at the meeting last time, and that this was a red flag issue.
It appeared, to me at least, it appeared one time that it might be converging with that March 31st utility committee meeting.
Okay.
But March 31st is literally the day that we were talking with the OEM, and the number at that point, that's when the number was bouncing around from 20 million to 30 million. And I just didn't feel like it. And honestly, 30 million, the way things were working at that time, 30 million could have been something else.
Right.
And I just did not want to go. In fact, I told Miles and Kevin over here, Miles Dentler and Kevin Robinson have been all over this and been taking care of it in a very good way. And I told them, we got to get with our OEM and tell them we can't bounce this number around. Give us a not to exceed, or we're not doing it. In fact, we only approved shipping the rotor to Charlotte. We didn't approve anything beyond that until they gave us a number that we felt we could defend. So, I apologize that you guys didn't, got that kind of a last-second information with that kind of a number. And we certainly do not desire it to happen that way, but it just kind of played out that way in this case. So.
And it was also the reason why, when I sent it out at 5:47, I mentioned that I would be authorizing it the next day, so that if any commissioners had any concerns or questions, I could have been contacted, or, could have put you in contact with Mike for more of that detail.
We'll try to be, we're all cognizant of it. We'll try to come up with some way that we can alert if there is an outage and it's kind of dragging on and we don't have a clear end to it and we know it might get worse. The trick about that is that, we also don't want to throw a big concerning number out there and then it turns out to be nothing.
The number is very concerning. It's the process, I think, for me, and not as much as the number. I know that y'all are going to get us a good number and that we're going to, but just the red flag, yellow flag warning, at the beach, like a yellow flag of, hey, this is a problem. Red flag is a problem. And if that was happening at the end of February, this would have not come as kind of as surprising as to me. But that's your wheelhouse too. And thank y'all for doing that, because I know that you're so cognizant of money and time, and I also know we don't want to, panic anybody either. But just from our standpoint as commissioners, it would have helped, at least for me, I can't speak for everybody else, having a little bit of a yellow flag warning, red flag warning, and then, hey, by the way, this is it, would be helpful.
Good point. Point well taken.
Yeah, some of that, though, is exploding what happens when you take the cover off. And you might want to talk about that just for a second, because I think it's beneficial, whoever would like to, how you really can't tell. Because when it shut down, you didn't think it was an issue other than the minor noise that was going to have to be addressed, correct?
That's correct. It was kind of an evolving process it started with a trip of the unit, involved into a bore scope on suspicions that something wasn't right, to, yes, we see something with the bore scope. Now we go into a forced outage event where we're pulling the machine apart and we find more damage, and then we're working root cause analysis. We're also working with the OEM to get this machine pulled apart as quickly as possible to find the extent of the damage. It's an evolving process, until eventually the rotor was removed and taken off site for repair.
Anything else?
It is just that. Even in the bore scope inspection, initially, we were just getting back from a conference with the other users of this machine, and we got into the inlet and did a preliminary visual. Didn't see anything. When the bore scope tech arrived after the unit cooled, it was the latter part of his inspection that he actually found the damage. And then again, you have to get in the machine to assess the damage, and it truly grew. Where it really grew was the rotor going off site, and we did not have that information until those dates presented, and that caught us off guard. We're all working, we're thumbs up. We think we're going to be able to take care of everything here on site, and then it changed.
It's the heart of the cost of the unit.
It is.
It's where all the dollars are. So, to your point, though, knowing it's offline, knowing there's an issue, bring that up in the utility committee meeting and say.
Or even in an email. Even hey, we don't have the top off yet. We think we might be able to handle it, and I know that's hard for y'all. I know that you don't want to guarantee something and put something in writing to where then we come back and be like, well, y'all said it might not be a problem. I get that, but I do think there's just a little, again, just to do the analogy of rough water. Green flag, we're all in. Yellow flag is and then red flag is, hey, it's an issue. We don't have all the details yet. We're waiting for people to, because I understand it's like managing a house. The house looks good on the outside and everything's going well, and you have a leak underneath the floor, and then you have to chisel through a foundation, and you're like, oh, we didn't know it was that bad. I get that. Yeah, I appreciate that very much.
We understand your request.
Got it.
Thank you.
So, All good with that?
I think Commissioner
Yes,
McLeod.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. My timeline for getting the repairs done and the unit back up and running, and then budgeting for this, can you speak to that?
They're working on it, all right, so I'll be a little bit of caution here because they're working on it in the shop now, and anytime that they're working on a rotor, they can give you an estimate, and then that can change based on whatever happens. They try to install something that doesn't work right, they have to redo it or something. That can change. I think May 18, is that the last date we got to get it back?
It's close, yes, sir. It's floating right around that date.
So May 18 is the date we're working off right now for them to be finished in their shop and get it back to us. And then we have 10 days, I think, reinstallation.
It's longer, yes, sir. Their current schedule shows about the second week of June.
Second week of June.
End of June is relatively safe.
End of June is safe, yes, sir. We're really leaning on to vet everything possible, what to expect when you come back to the field. There's a lot involved with rotor repairs, going back in the machine. You have to be very thorough on the reassembly.
And not to do that is to create millions of dollars of damage. More.
It's not even an option, that's
We're
correct.
doing everything we can in parallel on site while they're working on the rotor in the shop.
Follow up to that, what's the contingency if this goes on past, much longer than end of June?
So we've already, Paul Ships and our Power Resources Group does a really good job of purchasing power. And we have done some purchase power agreements. It's kind of month by month. You don't want to lock anything up in the time when you might be back because it's going to be a higher price in order for them to guarantee it. But he's done a really good job of providing power for each month that we're offline. So we will be able to purchase power and make up for the lost capacity. If you're talking about the capacity, we'll be able to cover for the lost capacity by working with the other utilities in our own pool and then other utilities around us.
In the budgeting.
In terms of the funding, we've got a few options that we are evaluating, and we're going to be talking to each of the commissioners about that as we develop that a little further along.
Okay, talking to us about that.
Sourcing.
When?
On this next one.
Likely on the next one-on-one rounds.
Okay. That's important, right? My colleagues,
Yes, sir.
we need to, okay.
Yeah, we're certainly aware that we're going to need to talk about the funding options, and we've started developing them. We're not really ready to have that conversation just yet, but that is coming.
Well, the reality is it probably won't end up at 21.
Well, that's part of the,
Yeah. Well, and everybody needs to be aware of that. It could very well go.
Commissioner Mann.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike and team, for giving us that explanation. So I just kind of want to go to the bird's eye view of our generational capacity here because, I think that we've been also focused in our utility meetings with our gas prices and rates and everything, that then you lose sight of, where are we with our generation capacity? And then you even go back to, decommissioning Unit 3 and then going into the RICE engines. You're like, oh, Unit 5, where, we haven't had a lot of attention placed on Unit 5 since probably 5-6 years ago when we started to think about where we were and where we want to be in the next couple decades. So when you think about the life cycle of Unit 5, isn't that the one that we were thinking, when we were looking at the RICE engines, let's get Unit 5 to get us 8-10 years longer before we have to make an investment.
Yes.
So with this current expenditure, it's kind of like with the Calpine unit or even with the RICE engines, we all know that there's contingencies and that we're in supply chains and everything's higher. But Unit 5, I think, was just not really probably on any of our radar. I mean, it should be. All of it should be on a radar, but because of those other things that we were more focused on. So if you just take a minute to say, because in my mind I'm like, wow, $20 million, would that have gotten us another RICE engine? Or, oh, that doesn't really matter because those are our quick starts to pair with our solar. Just to kind of, if you could give us a minute to say, we decommissioned Unit 3, we've got 6 RICE engines plus a little purchase power and solar for Unit 3. So then Unit 5 was supposed to last us 8 to 10 years before our next bonding. What happens now with this, surprise?
So Unit 5 is in our 10-year site plan. We fully intend to run it for 10 more years. Another RICE engine would have gotten us 20 megawatts and would cost about what we're going to spend on fixing Unit 5 and get 350 megawatts. So
that's powerful information.
Unit 5 we're depending on Unit 5 to get us at least 10 years. That would get it to its 30-year life cycle, and then some of these units run beyond their 30-year life cycle. So, but we certainly are depending on it for that. Smaller generation would cost a lot, like the Rice units, not get us that many megawatts. So we need to get beyond that 10-year horizon really before we think about a unit that would replace that many megawatts. Because the rule of thumb used to be $1 million per megawatt, but it's more than that now. So in the past, you could buy a unit like Unit 5 for $350 million. It's well beyond that now. So we're talking about a major expenditure if we were to try to replace that many megawatts in one chunk. So that's one of the reasons why we're kind of emphasizing we're looking at trying to simplify the process for rooftop solar, for utility scale solar, energy blocks, anything that we can do, whereas when new load comes in, we can provide solar to go with that to at least kind of offset that load so we don't increase another or introduce another need for increased capacity. So that's one of the reasons you'll hear us talking about that, trying to do something at the distribution level that offsets that load so we don't have quite that urgent need for capacity. So, but Unit 5 is our flagship.
Yes.
I mean, we were, I know you all have lots of other stuff to focus on, but the minute Unit 3 came offline, we immediately began looking at Unit 5. And, the word Kevin and Miles can tell you, the word within production is that is our flagship. That's our major unit. And we have to, the rotor, we had scheduled an outage in 2024 and one in 2028 to do some other work. Whenever you get forced into a 3-month outage that you weren't planning on, you start looking for what could we do now instead of taking another 3-month outage later. So part of the reason we're going ahead and making this investment in that rotor is to do some things that would keep us from having to do that again a year from now or 4 years from now.
So thank you. I just wanted, especially Commissioner McCarley, because I agree that's a huge sticker shock when you get that emergency expenditure. So it's really important to know that that's going into the 350 megawatt generation, because otherwise you have no context for that spend. So I'm thankful for just kind of showing us again why we need that Unit 5 to last 10 more years, and that price, although it seems exorbitant, it is reasonable to get us for 10 more years versus our alternatives.
And it won't be all we spend in that 10 years on it. There will be other things that come along. But it is our workhorse, and to have our workhorse down as we're getting towards peak is not a good thing. Commissioner Music.
So the memorandum that came out said that it was going to be paid through the energy bond. You're saying that may or may not be correct.
One of ones.
That's one of the options.
Commissioner Simmons.
So this was a complete shocker to everybody?
The extent of.
Pardon?
The extent of.
So there was no anticipation at all?
No, this event occurred with a failed 16-inch metal bellows is what we've kind of arrived at for a root cause so far within internally to Lakeland. We've done our own root cause analysis. We're waiting for Siemens to do the same so we can compare notes. But this was actually a piece of equipment that was not on the engine. It was out in the balance of plant, but it's used for cooling for the rotor. So the air that goes from the compressor through this piece of equipment and back to the rotor for cooling actually failed, created some air differentials, which caused a displacement of air within the compressor and caused it to stall. And when it stalled, it created major damage in the compressor, downstream damage.
I've got a follow-up question, if I may. And it obviously will pertain to the industry, and it may be a crazy question, but is there any insurance for situations like this?
Yes.
That's a great
That's the question, yes. We will be filing an insurance claim on this.
Okay.
We've engaged those folks. They actually came out to site already and have an initial request for information that we just received yesterday, and working with us and Siemens to get to the bottom of it.
And what would be the percentage of insurance reimbursement?
Since we have Joyce.
Let Joyce.
Why don't we let Joyce take that?
While we're still investigating and getting information to the adjuster, our broker, subject matter expert, and the AIG engineer, We're still exchanging information because it was a surprise to everyone, the extent of the damage that was there. But it is insured, and we're getting that information. So I don't really have any numbers at this point in time, but we are all working together to get to that number so that we can present that to you.
Yeah, I would be interested to know what that percentage of insurance, because that would obviously play into the bond, the payment, the cost,
We have two issues going on. You have the administrative side of all of this to handle. You got to get power up, and both have to happen.
I think it's a great question.
Yes.
Just a point of clarification. My issue more was, yes, of course, the money, but I know that that's influx. It's the process with which
Communication.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to, since Commissioner Madden pointed out the cost, and I did appreciate that differential, that is obviously a concern, but it's the process of comms and communication and how we message, and how we message the process, because we get what you do is really complicated, and then this is a really, really big deal. I think for me, again, if we had, and to Commissioner Simmons' point too, that yes, it was very surprising when we unearthed everything, but I think for us, it would have been good to know that this was, there was a problem.
I wanted more of a heads up.
There was just if there's a problem, I'm not going to get into your lane of how bad the problem is, but hey, there's a problem and we're working it, we're figuring it out, we'll have more information later. That's a little more helpful than just a blanketed pop. Yeah. And to be honest, the 21 million is why the pop went higher on my radar of, that's painful, which I know y'all feel that way too. So I just want to be very, very clear with that respect, that it's as much the money as it is the comms, from my perspective.
I would suggest we have, Sean mentioned one-on-ones. I would suggest that we elaborate on that notification a little bit during one-on-ones, because I think we're going to have an opportunity during that to discuss it and, the funding of it. So, and that's going to give an opportunity to kind of, because the timing enters into it. Talking about insurance, we will file insurance, but we won't have insurance money for 2 to 3 years. We're closing in. Joyce, correct me if I misstate, but we're closing in hopefully on a Unit 3 issue that we filed insurance on. Unit 3 shut down in 21. So we're hopefully closing in on a settlement on that. So the timing comes with that bond, with the cost. The timing becomes an issue too. So I think I would suggest we can discuss that during the one-on-ones and really kind of drill down into that a little bit.
Do you want to save that for then, Joyce? Or?
Yeah, why don't we do that? But typically, he's right. It's a couple-year process to get through to when we actually receive the money back from the insurers.
Commissioner Simmons.
I'd just like to kind of echo what Commissioner McCauley said. Even though we did not know until it happened, I mean, wasn't there a date of February or something when something was suspected? I mean, I would have liked to have known that a problem was about to occur before we got that email the other day. I mean, even if you couldn't have been specific, or even with the exact dollar amount, let us know something's about to come down the pipe that could create some real damage, potential cost. I mean, that would have kind of softened the blow somewhat to me.
I understand. All want to hold hands together in this process. Everybody's got it, right? Okay. Anything else, sir, on that?
That's all.
All right. I'm not even queued up for what's next, so that's my bad. Okay.
City Attorney resolutions. First resolution is an amendment to a local agency program agreement with the FDOT. They had originally agreed to pay the city $430,000 for some sidewalk improvements along Joseph Street between Central Avenue and the Westgate Central Trail. Because of some timing issues as to when some of the city's continuing contracts with our construction inspectors are going to expire, Public Works and the DOT got together and have decided it will work better for this project for the DOT to provide their construction inspection people to inspect this project. So all we're doing here is simply taking the $50,000 that was earmarked for that particular phase of this project, taking it out of the agreement with the DOT and giving it back to the DOT, and they're going to perform that service instead. So that'll reduce the amount they provided for this project from $430,000 to $380,000.
Questions on that? Next.
Next item is a amendment to our guarantee agreement with the FDEP relating to the Polk Regional Water Cooperative, PRWC, between Swiftmud and a low-interest loan with the state revolving fund loan through the DEP. We paid for a lot of engineering, design, testing back when we first created PRWC in 2016, 2017. Swiftmud obviously has a large voice in this because they're providing 50% of the construction funding for these wells, and they are requiring that the PRWC install 2 additional testing production wells, one for the southeast well field and one for the West Polk well field. So that is going to increase the cost of the planning stage of this project. So originally, our loan with the DEP was $9,900,000. That's going to bump the cost of that up to $13,624,000. That's obviously shared with all the different municipalities that comprise the PRWC. The result of this to the city of Lakeland is that our share of the state revolving fund loan with the DEP will be increased by $820,095. That is actually a direct loan with the PRWC, but the FDEP is requiring that each of the individual members of the PRWC guarantee the repayment of that in case the PRWC defaults. So this is simply amending our guarantee agreement. We're going to guarantee the repayment of an additional $823,000 for these new test production wells.
And that's to the extent of our share of that cost of those wells. Questions?
Is it not 3.7 million or 800 and some thousand?
The increase is
the increase brings it up to $3.7 million, the city of Lakeland share.
What is that? What period is that? What period does that cover? Is that annually?
No, that's the entire amount.
For those wells, for those test production wells. So.
Perpetuity?
These are test production wells, so hopefully they will indicate that everything is feasible to construct the ultimate deep water wells, and then we'll move forward to the construction of the actual project.
Oh, okay. That's a one-time event.
Yes.
Okay.
So this cost is a one-time event for those 2 wells, and there is other costs for the deep well. And all of this is to make sure that we can get the quality of water we would anticipate that we can to be able to process through the ROs to be able to utilize that water. And our goal is to get about 12 million gallons a day out of this ultimately.
What's RO?
Reverse osmosis, but they're gigantic filters. This is not my, do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, they're on a skid, so it's a membrane technology that filters the water out. Think of it as just purifying the water.
Okay.
We're pulling this from deep, and it's sludgy. So you take it out, you pull that out, you get water that's good from it, and you put the sludge back down.
It's brackish.
Basically, it's just desalinization.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's briny water, right? It's salt water.
Okay.
Right. Commissioner Mann.
So there's that short little video that they've got. Could we play that? I think unless my colleagues just want to watch it, but they show just, in 2 seconds, you're like, they show the southeast pump going down, bringing the sludge up, and then having the little plant.
I have not.
Is it Swiftmud? Where do I watch that? I follow the PRWC stuff.
Can you send that?
Yeah, I'll send it.
Thank you.
Because, it's like super short, and you're like,
You can
that
throw
stuff
it
we've
in
been
on
talking
that.
about forever is on a video. You know me, I like a video.
It's good
I'd love to be
educational.
included on that if you're sending it.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Thank you.
But Commissioner Simmons, essentially, we've got a water permit for 38 million gallons per day that's going to expire in 2038. And our water supply is always under challenge from the state. They're trying to cut the use of the upper Florida aquifer, which is a cleaner source of water. You don't have to go through the whole desalinization process. So we're trying to diversify our water sources. And so this is developing alternative water supply to, one, prepare for that 2038 date where we're going to lose some of our permitted capacity through the upper Florida aquifer, then also to ensure against any kind of possible regulatory cutback to our water supply before 2038. So that's essentially what's going on here.
We actually have more allotment than we use, because we run at about 24, 25 million gallons a day, with 38 million out here. So they want to cut you to what you are, but in the midst of a period of time when you're growing, and when it takes 8 to 10 years to build the wells. So you have all these conflicting priorities at the same time to make it happen, and that's why drawing from another layer gives us another 10 million gallons a day that we could have in the midst of that growth.
And the other aspect of this is that SWCMUD has agreed to pay for 50% of the construction costs, which are significant, so it's
as long as we comply with everything that the PRWC does as a group.
Okay, very good.
And I do want to just brag on our mayor, because 6 years ago, I would go to these PRWC meetings, and I'm like, holy, what? I mean, what do we have to do? Why can't we just keep using our aquifer? And you're like, who's wanting to steal our money? You know, it just was terrible to think about what our ratepayers would have to pay for this alternative water back then. And then we have to all get together with the county players, and no one wants to pay anything, you know, but really, you know, Mayor Mutz and the other leadership throughout the county have just got it together and said, we're not going to fight. We're just going to get and work on this. And Palmer and his team are working on this. And now that we're the fastest growing county in the country, we're like, good God, thank you that we started this, 6 years or whatever ago that we did, or we would really be in trouble.
It's one of the great recent ways the county has really pulled together and worked all. And we were fragmented enough that there wasn't an interest to do that.
No, I didn't think we'd come together. If you would have come to a few of those first meetings, you're like, this is impossible. So, but thank God we did.
Yeah, great teams across the board in our water, just does a superb job of leadership in that.
And then you're shovel ready for the state and federal funds when they become available.
And you just don't recognize this takes a decade to produce, and so you can't go, all of a sudden we need more water, and let's just turn on another faucet. It isn't there, Okay.
Well, actually, we have a utility item.
So then we now go to our
have one utility item today, that's an amendment with Kubra, which does all of Lakeland Electric's billing and payment services. We've had an agreement with them for a number of years, and it's set to expire at the end of this month. We are only the only thing the amendment does is extend the agreement for a one-year period, and the reason we are only extending it from a one-year period is because we have a number of other contracts with Kubra for different services, and Lakeland Electric staff has been working for some time to consolidate all of those services into one enterprise services agreement. So as we work towards that, we still need this in place, obviously, to make sure that our customers receive all the billing and they process all that, and mailing and postage is also included. So that one-year extension of the agreement totals $721,200, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY23 budget. But we anticipate following this year that will bring you an enterprise services agreement, which combines more of those services. So we'll have everything under one umbrella with Kubra.
And this is kind of the tie together that we were all trying to talk about in the last utility committee meeting. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Questions? That's Commissioner Simmons.
That amount you mentioned, $775,000.
$721,200.
And that covers what period?
That's a one-year period for all of our billing and processing, including the mailing and those services.
So that's what we are currently paying on an annual basis?
I believe last year's, in 2022, I think the amount was $828,000 for a one-year period. So this is actually a
Yeah, we've
decrease.
shaved about 20% with a lot of the electronic. So Kubra is a great partner for the utility. They do all of our paper billing and our electric billing. Any way you pay us goes through Kubra. So unless it's cash, of course, in the Dropbox and all that. So that's our lifeline to our revenue. So like she said, we've been able to, through several processes, been able to cut that annual cost down per year. And we want to, like she said, consolidate, do an enterprise because they deliver a whole lot of other products and services.
I'm just curious, what percentage does that represent with regard to your total revenue?
So they send out about 1.6 million bills a year, and which is a little over $350 million in revenue. So.
Okay, I would have to get my calculator.
Percentage-wise, I do not have it. I can do it.
It'd be a 0.1. something. But, and do they do the integration to the website of billing, or do they actually run that piece of the website?
They run the website, they do all of that for us as well.
Okay.
Yep. And if we've got supplemental things we want to add to it, we of course have space to that, but that's a huge value add for us as well, because that's a great price.
So the little texts you get that talk about where you are in the course of the month, that's all out of this system?
Notify, Storm Center, all of the retail cash, which I presented, that's a Kubra program. The kiosk is a Kubra product we're phasing out, so we're always looking for improvements. It's a huge lift. That RFP is going to take me the year, but I'll be back with the enterprise, not the RFP, but the enterprise contract.
So 1.6 million bills a year, I would not have thought that number. That's a big number.
Not all mail.
Not all mail,
Electronic
right?
as well.
Yep. And that's why we push, hey, paperless billing, because we can drive those costs down as she presented. We've gotten it down. Yeah. The postage is killer.
Ridiculous.
Commissioner Music.
So Kubra is the one, because they're doing the paper as well, so any inserts that we want to send goes through them, and is that relatively seamless and easy to do when we're adding inserts and things of that nature?
It is. We give them information, and they print, I believe it's out of Texas now, and mail from there, but yes.
We do it for water, electric, anyone who wants to.
Because I was thinking about the BBIC and Xpera, right, is when that comes up, is especially if there's areas that we want to hit. I mean, a lot of people that do get paper billing, they'll open that and see that there's those options available. Just think interesting from an advertising standpoint.
We can put all types of information in those mail outs and the paper bills. We can put it on with our electronic.
Will we save any money with the enterprise agreement, or it just consolidates it?
We hope to.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
Both. We're always looking to save money.
We sent 1.9 million texts to customers last year, so we're looking to save money per text, because you pay per SMS notification. That's at 5, we're looking to get it to 2.
Wow.
To match that of the outage notifications, notify. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Commissioner Simmons.
Did you say you were phasing out kiosk machines?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I presented last utility committee was the retail cash payment program that we rolled out for our cash residents. So basically, the kiosk, when we first implemented that program was, I believe, in 2016, and that was kind of a bridge to give cash customers an outlet until we could find something to solidify that program. The retail cash payment program that we've just implemented beginning of last year gives them the freedom to go to Walmart. It's retail outlets, Walmart, Walgreens, 7-Eleven, a lot of the stores that they are driving by to go to those kiosks, and gives them a safer and a formidable way to pay their cash payments. Yeah.
So when will they be eliminated?
We don't have a timeline. We want the numbers of the retail cash to rise.
Okay.
And it's all going to be well thought out. We signed a 1-year extension on the kiosk for that. I don't want to yank anybody's ability and convenience of paying their bill. I'm very mindful of that. We've got a couple of locations we're going to be watching that are utilized less than the others. Those will probably be the first to go, but we want to make it a seamless process.
How many do you have?
We have 4. We have one at the Northside Library, one at Kelly Rec, one at the town center there on Memorial, and then one at the admin.
I would have thought you'd had more, just 4.
Yeah. At the time, it sounded great. I think the mall would be a great place, but, those just don't get the foot traffic that they used to. So it's just, we're trying to evolve and make it easier. We did have a meeting last week with Kubra about an app, and I was
Just put one at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it'll be a thoughtful process, and you guys on the committee and the commission will be notified as we're.
We're also going to create the ability to have communication on how you could pay through your phone or through your computer. And so somebody could watch that and, side by side, because we can't make the assumption that's easy for everybody.
Right.
And that's the easiest. They don't have to leave their house, and they.
Well, we're gonna make it as easy as possible. I mean, the sorry. The demo I saw last week, I was impressed.
That's great. Other
Good things
questions?
to come.
Great. Stay on course. So nothing else there on Scooter? We're all good? All right, so then everybody else in the room can leave if they want to. We're open for comments from commissioners. Yes.
I have a question, and Brian may be able to answer this. I had one of my friends called me yesterday. How does our parking work downtown? They get in parking tickets. They have an office downtown. They go down and have breakfast at a place and park down by Mitchell's, and they go to their office and park in another spot. And they get a ticket. You get 2 hours a day no matter where you're at.
You can't, and it's out of Public Works.
Yeah, so we have traffic ops and public works.
So it accumulates on that
Brian
license.
has a lot of that.
He hadn't figured that out for a while. So
He thought he got a new spot.
well, yeah, he thought you moved, here.
And it does say it on the sign. It says for the day, 2 hours a day.
He just maybe been lucky before. Should have played the lotto then.
I'll let you know. Other comments or questions?
So I think, I know that the SRO situation is really, since I've been at lacrosse games this week, it's a big topic of conversation. Everyone's really worried and concerned and it's not to diss the county and the sheriff's department. It's just to say how much our families love our SROs and
Or their relationships.
Yes, they have felt so secure, and they love our SROs. They love that they know them for 4 years throughout high school, and then in our middle schools and beyond. So I know that that is not our decision to make. It sounds like it's the superintendent's decision to make. But I do want to, going forward with how those decisions are made, like to know how we continue the success in our community policing program. I know that's an integral component to have officers in our schools every day who not just know the kids, know their families, know where they live. Then they go play basketball with them at Simpson Park, or they might be out at their PAL game, or they're at, the Black History Month Festival. I mean, they are in their lives, like their family members, you know what I'm saying? Those SROs, that's what it's become. So when you take maybe even a very qualified county, officer to put them in these schools, which are the size of small towns, frankly, these schools, Lakeland Harrison, it's 2,000 kids. I mean, that is a lot of people. And to know their background, to understand, their personalities, and to know them for that long, and then to have them removed with a new person, how long is it going to take for that new person to learn those kids, to learn that environment? And then there's going to, in my opinion, be a breakdown because those sheriff's officers don't go home to that neighborhood. They're not at those community liaison and, neighborhood meetings. So they might be every bit as trained on their craft of law enforcement, but it's what does that do for the city of Lakeland, that what the safety that we've enjoyed, and then even kids seeing our men and women in blue versus green, in our neighborhoods all the time, and at schools, and how that keeps our community feeling heard and safe. It's more than just, saying, well, we just want it to be streamlined at the Polk County school level. I can see that would be his desire to do that, to streamline that. All these things, whether it's traffic in the city or whether it's our safety, now makes me really, jump on the bandwagon for we should not have a school system with the geographic location that we have, the size of, North or whatever, Rhode Island, because we then can't feel secure that we can keep track of our safety inside our city, because schools are a big component of that. So I don't know. That's what, I want our city management team. I know you have, just so you hear from the citizens whom I represent, our SROs are beloved. And that is pretty special when you think about police and they're not beloved across the country. That I hate to do anything that's going to wreck the hard work that we've done, and Commissioner Walker with the gang task force, like community policing and all that before him. So anyway, The
Thank
stage
you.
is yours.
Yeah, so Chief Taylor and I did go down and meet with the representative from the Polk County Sheriff's Department and also the Superintendent Hyde. It was at that meeting where the superintendent informed us that it is his operational decision to make. He does not need approval from the school board, and his intention is to do just that. And so that's going to likely occur as soon as this next school year. Just yesterday afternoon, I had a meeting with Chief Taylor in my office, and I asked him to start working through and considering a program where we would appoint our existing SROs, who we will be able to absorb back into positions at LPD as liaisons to each of the schools where they served. And in that meeting with Superintendent Hyde, he talked about the fact that LPD is still welcome on those campuses as frequently as we want to be. LPD and those officers can still participate in after-school programs and mentoring programs and the like. There's also an opportunity where for the extra details that for sporting events and the like, they're going to utilize LPD, so we'll still have those interactions at those events. But what we're working on is a program, as I talked about, that we would keep LPD officers. Many of them will likely be the SROs in the schools that they're going to be coming out of to go back to the positions at LPD in that liaison capacity. And then I've asked Chief, what does that look like? How frequently are they going to go visit the campuses and interact with the students and report back and the like? So we're working on a program like that for that exact reason, because I've heard the same things from the citizens in the community. I've heard from the commissioners, and I know there's that large concern. So we're trying to mitigate that through a program like I've talked with Chief about just yesterday.
And then how do we pay for that program, knowing that, now we have a partnership with the county who helps augment those costs. So we will not have any pay from the county, but yet we still need to have a presence. So how is that cost?
That would be part of their assigned duties. So there would be no additional cost. I mean, their salary is their salary, and again, they're going to backfill into the positions that we have available for them. So just as part of now their assigned duties, they would have this potential to be that liaison. But now again, we just talked about that yesterday, and Chief Taylor will be getting back with me to report back on what that would look like. But that's the concept behind it.
Well, and I would love, all transition's tricky and change is not easy, but just to kind of keep us abreast of that, just so that we're able to say, because if it could become a cost concern. You're like, great, you still expect us to be in the schools because of this, because the citizens want it, but yet then they're stretched, or they're having to take on new duties, or we can't hire other officers in other areas because they still have to be in the schools basically kind of for free, meaning there's no one from the county side paying them. So, that's going to be something that's very important, to us, and I just hope that you'll just keep communicating to us, throughout the process, so we can assure parents, what's happening.
Once Chief has gotten back to me and they've had a chance to kind of digest that and work through what that would look like at LPD, we'll schedule him maybe at a commission meeting as one of kind of those updates from the departments, and he can present, what that program's going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments by commissioners?
I would like to just say, I'd like to meet with each of the commissioners if you're able to stay around. I know Commissioner Madden and I are set to meet anyway. I just would like to update you for just a few minutes, each one individually. If you can't, for those who can't stay around, I'll just give you a call.
Okay, like in how length?
Like I'm going to go right down the hall and start
time?
seeing who's available. About 5 minutes maximum.
I'll go last to give other people, since I had a heads up.
Okay.
You can go with me. I'll
Last,
wait
yeah,
because
we have other things to discuss.
Okay.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Brian, please.
I don't have my badge, just so I can.
And I haven't had any.